Hello, 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 and everyone. Welcome to Anchor Watch. I am your humble host, Bobby Jones, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to have the hardest working woman on Lincoln Square to join us today. The legendary, the great Miss Maya May, who, if you haven't seen her individual show, if you've not seen her with Rick Wilson, I highly recommend that you do so. But if that wasn't enough for you, now she's going to be starting a new show. And I want to say it's on Thursdays with
Yes.
Michael Fanone of Capitol, January 6th, Capitol defending police officer Michael Fanone, called Protect and Serve. So I just want to welcome you, Maya, finally getting you on and tell us a little bit about the show that you'll be starting this week.
Thank you for having me on, Bobby. First of all, I consider you to be one of the most knowledgeable people that I don't know in person about everything on international affairs. I'm like, you know what? I need to study Bobby like a book, is basically how
Mm,
I approach your show. So thank you for having me here. Yes, Michael and I do have a show coming out, and it's looking at now that it's clear that and I don't know if you saw that DHS decided that they were not going to follow the law in California. Gavin Newsom had was a proponent of the not wearing masks
mhm,
for ICE agents and law
mhm,
enforcement, prohibiting law enforcement to wear masks. And DHS has just said, well, whatever, we're going to flaunt the law, we're going to do whatever we want. And so I think this show that we're doing is about what happens when the enforcement community that is meant to serve and protect the
mhm,
people no longer works for the people, but just serves
mhm.
Donald Trump specifically. Not,
Right.
not no oath to the Constitution. No, that literally it's like obliterated everything in their policies and rule books. It's like no, you just have to serve dear leader. And so we're gonna talk about that. And he's a great person to talk about that with because he's been on
Mhm.
both sides now. So
Right. He knows what right looks like, and you cannot question his dedication to the country, the nation, and not one individual. Speaking of President Trump and our nation and just things in general, President Trump addressed the United Nations today. And so this is interesting because for those who don't know, the United Nations have basically all their world leaders roll through once a year to address the rest of the world directly, no middleman. So you can't blame the ambassadors, you can't blame your Secretary of State or foreign minister. You get it from the horse's mouth. And I don't know how I can phrase this without sounding just mean, but the man showed his whole ass in front of the world today. He told the rest of the world that their countries are, quote, going to hell, as in they are degenerating. He told everyone that America is leading with inflation going down. He talked about how America is the world leader and how everybody needs to follow the policies that we're seeing. He talked about how the migrant crisis is not America's fault, but America will fix it. I mean, you've traveled the world, you've lived abroad. Can you please explain to me what are you hearing as far as how the world views the United States these days?
yeah, well, one doesn't even need to travel the world. One could just
Mhm.
hop on TikTok and see the many videos of people asking America if we're okay. I as I was saying before we started to record, that I lived in Argentina for 8 years.
Mhm.
And so I have a lot of friends who still live in Argentina, who since moved on to Colombia, Mexico, who live in Europe. And everybody is saying the same thing. Wow, so glad that we're not there in that mess. And, I like that it's all the world leaders having the opportunity to speak directly to the
Mhm.
people. And Donald Trump is clearly an indication that we're not sending our best. Like this is the best America has to offer is a man who is going to basically what he's trying to do set the stage so that he can push a make Europe again a great again
Mhm.
movement. A make
Mhm.
but the world has eyes
Yes, they
in
do.
different algorithms. So they see us.
Yes.
They see
Yes.
what we're doing and it's a
Yes.
mess.
No, I think you're right. Many of them have been here. and they recall times when things were different. You know, it's interesting. You mentioned he's planting the seeds for the "Make Europe Great Again" philosophy to spread. What's amazing is a lot of those countries remember what it's like to have fascism, dictators, non-free elections, extremist groups taking over. And the thing that jumps out to me, some of my friends are abroad, you know, spending 26 years in the Navy. I got a lot of them around the world. They're like, how do you guys not see what's happening? And I got no answer for them. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, hey, there was 70 million of us that said, hey, this is ridiculous, but there were more that don't see it, you
I
know?
think people are living on autopilot, right? Like
Mhm.
America. So this was the beauty of America in many ways, and I recognized it when I got to Argentina. I was like, wow, my brain really has to work here because
Right.
not everything runs like clockwork the way it does in the U.S. And this was back in 2005 when I
Mm,
first went to Buenos Aires, and I liked it because for me it was a new challenge.
mhm,
But I recognize that it was very different in the US, where if you do, there's a formula, and that formula, for the most part, works. Things are
mhm,
stable. You go to, you go to college or trade school, you get a good job, you partner up with somebody, you buy a
mhm,
nice place, and these are the things that were supposed to be a part of the American dream. And it worked for
mhm,
a while
mhm,
until certain policies in the 80s, 90s started to cause the American dream to deteriorate. And
mhm.
so I think what's happening is people in the US took it for granted. We took it for
Right.
granted that the formula always worked, but the formula had variables, and people changed the variables. And when you
Mm,
change the variables of a formula, you don't get the same output. And so I don't think people see it because we were never meant to see it. We were just
mm.
we were following the formula.
Wow, wow. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there.
Sorry.
First of all, no, it's great. No, because the first off, it's the assumption that Americans have always had that the best will always happen. These things will work out. No one's really going to stop you from voting. No one's really going to have the military march down your streets. No one's, I mean, that happens in other countries, not America, right? And for the longest time, we could even conceive that.
Mhm.
The fact that we're having a lot of these things happening, going on a beeline to the Supreme Court because they're unprecedented. There's no historical precedence for saying I'm sending the National Guard unannounced to Memphis, unrequested to Memphis. Or, hey, this is how I'm going to deal with Washington, D.C. And by the way, I'm not going to pay attention to your 30 days, of how long they stay on station. The fact that you got Los Angeles, you know, being completely, overrun by that little section that they police so hard because you want to get people used to the idea that the military, the American military, is now primary law enforcement. We've never, I mean, never, even back in the days where we didn't even have a standing army, we had a militia. We've never had that. And
Mhm.
now we're relying on Congress, and Congress is MIA. Um, they're supposed to be the primary check to the chief executive. They're not there. So when I have friends that hit me up and ask how is this happening, the first thing I say to them is Congress is not doing their job, and the people are too ignorant to tell Congress to do it. That's how I'm
I
seeing it.
I think it's a combination of ignorance, but also people are not seeing it. Not everybody
Mm,
is perpetually online in the way that we are. And so if ICE
true.
isn't yet marching through their neighborhood, the algorithms right now are not controlled in our favor, if you will. And so
Mm,
if
mm,
somebody is living in a different algorithm, given how online life is right now, if they're living in a different algorithm, they're living in a different reality. I send text messages to my friends who I know are living in a different reality, and I ask them, I say, "Hey, what are you seeing?" And they're just like, "Oh, my son is having a great first week at school." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. So you have no idea what's going on right now.
right,
Great." But it's
right.
designed that way, and we know that it's designed that way. The question
Hmm.
is, and this is where I want to send out the Mayday to people who are in other countries and say, what did you do to fight fascism in
Right.
your country because, like you mentioned, we don't have that visceral memory. At least
Right.
most Americans don't. Black Americans,
Mhm.
obviously, our
Yes.
ancestors do, our
Yes.
parents do, our families know what it's like to have to live with
Mhm.
fascism.
Mhm.
Uh, and so I think the question becomes, how do we take that knowledge that we have and and even not just get it out there, but also inform people that there is a problem? Because
Mm.
my biggest fear is that a lot of people still actually don't think that there's a problem.
That is, well, one, that's scary, but I think you're right. I think we've adopted this mentality where if it doesn't affect me, I shouldn't pay attention to it, or it doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect me personally. The question that you asked about the fascism thing is
Mhm.
fascinating because most of those countries overthrew the yokes of fascism, authoritarianism through violent conflict, whether a world war or
Mhm.
two, or individual civil wars, etc. The hard part is to try to break free of that peacefully. It's very rarely done. And that is what we're going to basically have to do. Because make no mistake, where we are right now, 8 months into this, compared to say a year ago, light
Mhm.
years different,
Mhm.
completely different, you know. And part of that, and I'm transitioning this on purpose, part of that is because there are institutions that have long been able to become ubiquitous as being American that are now no longer standing up for their individual rights. So talking about the media, the Jimmy Kimmel thing that just happened here. For those who don't know, who may be watching abroad, Jimmy Kimmel is a very famous comedian, has a late night talk show, and he has made it his business to go after Donald Trump over the years. Well, in the wake of the Charlie Kirk murder, he made a comment referencing Donald Trump's lack of grief. And they used that as an excuse to pressure ABC to take him off the air. And they did for what, 2 days? Because
Mhm.
the backlash of him being removed, people canceling Disney Plus and all of those things that were associated with ABC cost Disney, the parent company of ABC, $4 billion, like
It's a lot of
almost
billions.
overnight. That's a lot of money.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, that whole thing about, money talks, BS walks. Well, here we are. And so it got me really, really digging into just how often this current administration is going after specifically the media or any institution that is visible and has a certain level of prestige. So that's why he goes after the Harvards.
Mhm.
That's why he's going after ABC and then CBS and then NBC. They have a list, right? But what I think what the Kimmel situation shows is a glimmer of hope because people still have power when dealing with this, and they did it with this in this case with their wallets. But yeah, I know this is what's the word I'm looking for. It was shocking to hear that a man can get pulled off the air, especially from the quote free speech party unquote. But here we are. What do you think? How do you think people, especially the media, should deal with him moving forward?
Well, here's the thing. People, yes, money talks, and
Right,
but it was the way it was organized so swiftly because
right.
people were paying attention and saying, "We don't want to be gaslit." And Jimmy Kimmel is one of the few people who is willing to go on
Mhm,
air almost every
mhm,
night and tell the truth. And so I think people started to see truth slipping
mm,
away.
mm.
So not just obviously the precedent of the First Amendment actually mattering and being able to speak up, but seeing, oh no, this could be it. This could be because if Jimmy Kimmel falls, which
Mhm.
is such a strange domino to talk
Right.
about, but if the powerful, wealthy white male comedian domino falls,
Yep.
that part of the poem when they're like, oh, they're getting to me next. I think that really woke people up. And so, how long people stay awake, I do not know. And I think this is where everybody, it's like when the underbelly has been shown,
Mm.
right? So
Mhm.
the weak underbelly of the Trump administration has been shown. So this is the opportunity for every late night host
Mm.
to go in and
Yep.
go hard.
Yep.
Call out the
Yep.
fascism, call out the Christian nationalism,
Right.
call out the fact that all of the data is being wiped from websites that proves that
Hmm.
the Trump administration is cratering our economy. Call it out
Hmm.
and call it out hard now because this is an opportunity. It's an opening.
I don't think many people realize, but historically, comedians have always been the first and on the forefront of telling truth to power. And I mean, this is definitely your sphere. You know that. I I I guess my question for you as someone who has done that and has been on that ideological front line, you know, when do you start wondering if you're pushing too far? Do you have that litmus test in your mind? It's like, okay, I can't talk about this or this and the other, or are we at a point now where if you know it's true in some way, you've got to put it out there? It's not about timing. It's not about that. It's just getting the information out there.
I mean, so tragedy plus time equals comedy. That's the formula.
Mm, mm,
Um, in this particular instance, if he had have waited, for example, a day
right.
or two to do those jokes or a week to do those jokes, one, they wouldn't have been as powerful. Two, they wouldn't have led to. I think it's important to push the administration to see what it's willing to do. I think it was who is it just that just said, why is his name escaping me? John Oliver,
Yep.
who said, fuck you make me, I think
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
something
Basically.
like
Yeah.
that. So the challenge of the comedian is to say what needs to be said. And
Hmm.
the timing is crucial in this case, simply because this is a matter of our actual democracy. And so you don't want to pull punches, especially if you're
Mm,
punching up, which watch my show. But
yeah.
when you're
Right.
when you're
Yeah.
punching up, you want to do it immediately because you want to inflict as much damage on the power structures as possible. And so, um, did it obviously come off as crass to many people? Sure, but he was telling the truth. What's more crass than Donald Trump being in the stands and dancing, and then at the same time telling us that the nation is mourning?
Right. Exactly. The tones didn't make any sense. Were you surprised by how fast people, especially Hollywood, it's kind of interesting since the election, Hollywood has been kind of quiet, kind of low key, but I mean, people that are employed by Disney were like, "No, this is ridiculous. Do something about it." Were you surprised by that? I thought it came out of left field. I don't know if maybe they found their groove, maybe because it was one of their own that they were so strong, felt so strongly about it. But they make no mistake, you can go on social media; they were all over the place. Um,
Yeah, I can say I think it hit home for a lot of people who thought that it would never actually happen to someone like
mm,
Jimmy Kimmel, or to them, especially I think that because it was pulled off indefinitely, and because of that pressure campaign from the FCC, which was obviously it was pressure, right, from the FCC.
right,
That's the part that people tried to obscure a little bit. It's like the FCC literally went on Benny Johnson's show. Brendan Carr went on Benny Johnson's
yep,
show and talked about it. So
yep,
I think when people saw that that was a potential threat to their livelihoods, but also, yes, they're artists and artists are sensitive. I was going to say, as to quote
mm,
Erica Badu, like we're sensitive
mm-hmm,
about our shit. And so, yes, if you come
mm-hmm,
for one of ours, we're going to speak up, which I think a lot of people brought up the fact that, hey, if we can speak up this strongly for Jimmy
there, yep,
Kimmel,
yep.
and make a difference. Why aren't we doing the same thing for the trans community right now that is being blamed for literally everything under the sun by the Trump administration? And so I think we need to start to think about how we're going to use our power and wield our power as public figures, as prominent people, people in entertainment, because entertainers are not supposed to just be used to soothe the masses, which I think in many
Mm,
cases, right? Escapism, that's what movies originally was, it's escapism.
right.
And that right now is not the work of the artist. The work of the artist should be to afflict the
Mm.
powers that be and call attention to everything they're seeing. And so I think it's a call to arms, if you will, for the artist community. That art is activism, and it matters.
No, it truly does. You hit on something too. Carr has been so brazen to go on, Benny Johnson's podcast and basically just flat out say that they're doing this. The fact that they're not hiding the fact that they are going after political enemies like they have a list, right, is mind blowing to me because in the past, don't get me wrong, there have been American presidents that have done this in the past, but they had the good sense and the dignity to kind of hide it, to make it seem like, the president's power was not being used, in a disrespectful or illegal manner. That is no longer the case. One of the reasons I'm bringing this up is in the Department of Defense under Pete Hegseth, they are going after any military member that basically posts anything on social media that they don't agree with. And when I say don't agree with, it can be talking about Charlie Kirk's killing. It could be talking about an administration policy. They are spending time, people, and bandwidth to go after people's social media and see if it is in line with what they want. Now, granted, the first thing some of these people will jump on here and say is, well, in the military, you don't have the right to free speech, blah, blah, blah. You're absolutely right. However, you as a citizen, as a civilian, not in uniform, you can say what you want to about your government. Heck, you can work on campaigns. It doesn't stop you from being an American citizen. It doesn't kill your First Amendment rights. But what they are doing is they're targeting people for what they could construe as anti-Trump, not anti-American, anti-Trump, meaning going back to what we were saying about transgender community and stuff like that, those guys getting kicked out of the military without retirement benefits, without any of that, right? Out of nowhere. There were plenty of people who are in uniform, who are military, and then people like me, veterans, who were outraged by it. They're going to go after those people who are outraged by a policy that I think once it gets to the courts will be seen as illegal as hell, but a wrong policy. They're holding that against them. It will be held against them for their career. Disciplinary action will be taken. So this mentality of the fascists put this person on the wall, this person's wrong, make an example of them is here, which is why Jimmy Kimmel is so important, because it speaks to a larger thing. The Department of Defense, those guys can't speak up for themselves. Jimmy Kimmel could. Stephen Colbert could. The comedians were leading the forefront of this. My question for you is very simple. Do you think what the administration is doing by saying we're going after specific people, right, for ideas, this, that, and the other, do you think this is a long-lasting thing that can be sustained by the current government? I mean, even Ted Cruz spoke out against what happened to Kimmel. If you are in the you're a comedian, I guess my question is this y'all's new normal?
I mean, I don't think it's sustainable. I think, and the reason I don't think it's sustainable, and I'm glad you asked it that way, is because comedians are fearless. Comedy is one of the few art forms where, to get better at it, you have to go up in front of people and fail. There are very few where you have to actually do the work of failing forward in front of people over and over again, night after night. So it is, comedy already attracts people who are willing to be bullied, because that's what it can feel like sometimes on stage when you try a joke and a joke dies. And so going after, and I think this is why comedians are known as truth tellers. I wrote a very, I'm going to say, pretentious essay in grad school about Black comedians, about, I think it was called "A Spoonful of Sugar Makes the Humor Go Down" or something like this. But it was about the fact that a Black comedian can say something that a Black politician would get shot for. And so we've always used comedy as a way to tell truths in a way where we can say, but am I joking? And it's just a joke, but it's not, right? Especially when it's political comedy. And so I think going after comedians was a really, really bad idea, because he somehow thinks he's more powerful than comedy, and nothing's more powerful than laughter.
Right.
Laughter
Right.
is what brings communities together. Laughter is what
Hmm.
makes it possible for people to say, "Oh, I can do this." And that's like from a scientific perspective, it creates dopamine, endorphins,
Hmm.
serotonin. It helps with critical thinking and problem solving skills. And so, even the act of writing a joke is problem solving because it's an iterative process. You get up, you tell a joke, it doesn't work, you change a word, you change another word, you try it again. And so, just to even be funny, you have to be relentless. So, is it sustainable? No. I'd love to see him keep trying to come for comedians. It's just not
Wow.
that could be comedy could be the downfall of the Trump regime.
Well,
Uh, in
it's
fact,
funny you say that.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to cut you off,
No,
Maya.
no,
It's
go
funny you
ahead.
say that.
I can go on
No,
and on.
but so I'm glad you're bringing this up. I have famously said Vladimir Zelensky is the Jon Stewart of Ukraine. He was a comedian. Everybody is asking, well, how is this guy who had no military experience, basically ran as for president as a joke, been able to hold off the Russian hordes? You just literally laid it out. I thought it was just about he can communicate effectively because comedians know how to communicate with large groups of people and have them empathize with what they're going through, part of their storytelling process. But what I did not think through, and you just nailed, is that process of being able to readjust, to see something that doesn't work, change on the fly, to have it now hit in ways that you probably didn't think about. And y'all look at the world differently. This
Yeah.
man has galvanized the world in a way we haven't seen since really World War II. And he
Yeah.
has not one day of military experience because he's a comedian. And I think, wow, you just nailed that. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, he's like our patron saint at this point
oh,
because
really?
well, because it's the feedback loop, right? Like there's
Mhm.
no better feedback loop than telling a joke to either silence or laughter. And even more so, like a joke can work for a while and then suddenly it won't work. And so then you have to go back and go, what happened? Did I change my tone? Did I change the attitude? Did I deliver it differently? Has the climate in the world changed? And so the process of comedy is a problem solving process. And so yes, it's also the empathy and the observation. A
Right.
comedian can't write jokes without observing. And so comedy has to exist in reality. Fascists don't exist in reality. They create this warped,
Mm.
manipulated propaganda, but it's not real and it's not what people experience. And so a comedian is always going to be more popular, more powerful than a fascist. And this is why fascists hate. I think that's why they feel so threatened by comedy because they're like, what is all
Mm.
this truth breaking through when I'm trying to sell a bunch of lies? Like, can you imagine the roasting that will happen after Donald Trump's UN speech? He's talking about other countries going to hell when you could just go on TikTok and see it's going quite lovely in many of the countries that he says are going to hell. So a comedian would have a field day with that.
Right. I mean, I've been joking. I've been saying this for a while. I'm like, Saturday Night Live writers, they don't really work. They just replay what they see and just put people in costumes. And they've been making a killing since Trump came into the political sphere. I mean, seriously, like half the stuff that they have done, it's not like they're having to come up with stuff from scratch. It's just presenting it in a more rational way that has removed that situation and put it right back into reality, and you see how silly it is. I guess my thing is wow, we're really on the subject. I love this. Is comedy the way that we bring the country back together? Is it the way that we
Yes,
break the fever?
yes, yes.
Hmm.
Because
Really? You thought about
yeah,
this?
well, I mean, I want to say it's my life's work. You
Yes.
know, before I started doing shows with the Lincoln Project, I was touring colleges. So I was on college campuses, rural South Carolina, rural Missouri, and very Christian schools, and where I would ask myself, am I going to change up my comedy? Am I going to change
Hmm.
what I say so as to not offend this group or that group? And I always go back to a conversation that I had when I first started doing comedy. Maybe I was a couple years in, and I was sitting at a table with a white male comedian. And I asked him, I was like, "Oh, what set are you going to do?" And he goes, "Oh, the set I always do." And I was like, "Oh, huh. Because I was sitting there trying to figure out how to change up what I was going to do to fit this
Right.
particular audience. And here he is just boldly going to be himself. And so I adopted that attitude when I started to travel for comedy, talking to young people. And I said, I'm just going to get up there and I'm going to be me. And I'm going to tell my truth and hope it resonates with them. And the power of doing that was realizing that
Mm,
as long as I had their empathy, which you build empathy with comedy. When you first start your jokes, you let them into your world a little bit. So they start to see you as a human being and as
mhm,
a person, which doesn't really happen as much anymore, especially with politics. And so with comedy, and this is comedy that punches up at structures, not comedy that punches down. That's why I have a
right.
big problem with like the Dave Chappelle's of the world right now, because I feel
Mm,
like there are communities that are being targeted, and I'm like, why would you target that community? They're already vulnerable. Like target the powers that be. So anyway,
mm,
I want to get off my
mm.
soapbox on how
No, it
comedy
makes
changes
total
the
sense.
world, but but I do. I think it can. I think it can bring us together, because that laughter also brings down the. Especially if we could pick common targets like billionaires. Like I think that's one
Mhm,
thing. Taxing the
mhm,
rich is something that across the board brings people together. So I think it's depending on topics chosen and how it's approached. I think yes, maybe a comedy tour that is a group of conservative comedians and
mhm.
progressive comedians on tour together, like the Kings of Comedy, but with you
Hmm.
know,
That would
I don't know,
be that'd be fascinating.
spitballing here.
Let me ask you. Let me ask you this, Maya. Do you think part of the reason why comedy is able to break through is that people attend comedy shows, especially live? They attend them expecting to be challenged, expecting to be made fun of. It's almost like they're willing to accept criticism. Going back to what you said, hey, it goes down easier with a spoonful of sugar,
Mhm.
because I've literally seen people that I know personally that I'm just like, oh, they're sticking the mud, blah blah, and they'll go to a comedy show and say that they've been made fun of and they loved it, even though they're being told about themselves and how much either the way they dress or the chick that they're with. I mean, all sorts of stuff, right? But they're willing to accept it in that environment. I've never understood why that is. Is that just the expectation as comedians? You can go in there and be like, look, I'm gonna make fun of you, bought these tickets. You want to be part of this experience? Here we go. There it is. Is that it?
So I love it's the front row, right? So if somebody sits
Yeah.
down in a front row of a comedy show, they know that they are going to be talked to. And so if somebody doesn't want to sit in the front row, they usually don't, right? But if they're in
Right.
the front row, they know that's going to happen. And I think uh, people like to be seen. And when I say be seen, not physically, I mean see them, who they
Mhm.
are, what they're all about. And so when a good comedian can look at somebody, ask them a question or two, and then see them, because that's what like comedy is observing and seeing. And so it makes them feel worthy,
But
valid. And that's
yeah,
what a good politician should do as well, is make people
bingo,
feel seen, feel valid.
bingo. That I think, and there's the connective tissue. Bringing it back to what we're kind of talking about. It's like that aspect of being a politician, to being a public servant, has gone by the wayside. If you challenge anything that they say, especially the one in the White House, but heck, you can go down the levels, the members of Congress to local representatives now. I've seen clip after clip of people going to school boards and county commissioner boards saying, "Hey, this is stupid. Why are we doing this?" And they're like, "Get them out of here." And it's like, no, no, no. You work for me, right? But
Mhm.
there's this this disconnect where it's like, I want the notoriety, I want to be seen, but I don't want the scrutiny that comes with that. And that's what blows my mind about where we are right now, where the people who work for you do not want you to question their work. It's that simple. And in your sphere, if you were, like I said, if you were an audience member in a comedy show, anybody in that space is fair game. You know it walking in,
Mhm.
right? The thing I think that's really scary about where we are now is, as opposed to when you see someone in the front row and you make fun of them and they laugh because they hear what you said. Like you said, you acknowledge their existence and they think about how it applies to them. Those last two parts aren't happening in American society, where someone raises a community, a point, a marginalized community was like, hey man, we do not deserve this. the story famously of the people who were, the migrants in Ohio who were saying they were eating animals and stuff like that. It's like, what?
Right.
They felt like they were not seen, they were not heard. And when proven wrong, no apologies, no nothing. They were just like, you served the purpose of us trying to win Ohio. Who cares? Right. That's what bothers me. There is no recompense for the wrongs. There's no acknowledgement of people being people that, like you said, even in a comedy show, you feel seen.
Mhm.
I don't know how we get that back, Maya. I really don't. I think we failed.
Well, we haven't failed because it's not over yet. We may be in a
Yeah.
process of failing, but it's not
Yeah.
over yet.
That's true.
And I like to think so. Again, voting elections are the feedback loop
Hmm.
for politics.
Mm.
And I think the fact that politicians can be dismissive of their constituents, candidates even can be dismissive of some of their constituents, is because they know that through manipulated algorithms, through enough funding, they can get themselves back into office almost not against the will of the people, but against the knowledge of the people, if you will. So
Mm.
people are voting based on the information that is popping up into their news feed the most on Facebook. And well, it's there because a certain, PAC may have paid X amount of dollars to put that information in front of their faces. And so the feedback loop is broken. And so if we
Mm.
want to fix the system, we have to figure out how to get that part working again. And so, to me, that it's like the funding. It's the campaign finance reform that used to be
Mm.
somewhat bipartisan, a
Hmm.
little bit.
Long gone.
Yeah.
Long gone. And it's not just because people realize it maintains power, but those same campaign contributions keep these people in the limelight. See, I think we have an addiction problem. Our leaders, they're addicted to fame. They want the sound bites. They want to be on the Sunday morning talk shows. They want to be seen as someone that's in the know. But then when it comes time to vote or to push forward an agenda, they will vote to put Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in charge of all of our health, or Pete Hegseth in charge of our national defense. It's like, on what planet does this make sense? And that kind of leads to the last topic I want to bring up here. Ever since Trump came down the escalator in 2015, they have waged this war against DEI, and the whole thing, the way they interpret DEI is unqualified minorities and women and marginalized groups get jobs just because they're members of that group. Never mind the 200 and 30-year history of those groups being completely overlooked because they're in those groups and they're extremely qualified, overqualified, and then they may let one in. Right? Forget that reality, that historical based fact. What's blowing my mind is, in a pendulum swing to correct that, the mediocrity of, to be very blunt and honest, men, white men, Christian men, extreme right, that are put in power positions is terrifyingly scary. Um, that being said, they're trying to make this a whole thing where, kind of went under the radar, but it's a big deal. The nation's service academies, one of which I graduated from, the United States Naval Academy, is going to start accepting this test called the CLT, Classic Literacy Test, as an alternative or a substitute to the SAT and the ACT that all of us took to get into college, etc. And people may ask, okay, well, why is that a big deal? Well, it's a big deal because while it may give access to kids, and mind you, this test is basically given to homeschool kids that come from Christian educational backgrounds overwhelmingly. It's given by a for-profit entity, unlike the College Board that gives the SAT, that's nonprofit. But the kids that take it are homeschool kids that are basically very, very right leaning. And this is a big deal because Trump, the administration, Heritage Foundation in particular, wants this test to basically not only be used for college admissions, but to eventually possibly replace the SAT or the ACT or one of them, meaning that you have to learn conservative values, you have to do conservative teaching in order to do well on the test. So instead of trying to convert guys and girls into leaders and then make them more conservative, we get them as young conservatives and then build upon that. And this ideology just takes over, starting in the military, but then, of course, it'll go to elite universities. Ron DeSantis is trying to get it used for admission for all public universities in the state of Florida as we speak. He's been shot down a couple of times, but by the service academies accepting this, now you can say, hey, Harvard, hey, Yale, hey, Stanford, hey, Berkeley, you should be able to use this test too. We're seeing the education of our next generation being overwhelmingly influenced. K through 12, now going into college. I mean, Oklahoma, they give you the Trump Bible, but they're 49th in education. These type of things. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because you hit on it a second ago. We are not the most informed voters. We don't think critically when it comes to our policies in voting. And by doing this, by instituting this test, there's going to be a ripple effect where we will be even less informed. We will just take what people tell us to do and then push for those, even if it's against our own best interests. I guess the thing that I would ask you is, do you think Americans are willfully ignorant to what is going on around them? Or is this just something that has been baked into our education system or what we value, et cetera, et cetera? Is this now us where we don't value education as opposed to 20 years ago, 30 years ago when we were coming through school where, hey, best education possible? Is this a shift of Americans or a shift that is being pushed by the current administration?
Well, I think there's a cynical subset of America right now that is being willfully ignorant. And
Mm,
those are the people who are in middle management, people who are leaders but are staying quiet in order to protect their own personal self interest, people who are not willing to put anything on the line because they know perhaps in their lifetime it may not affect them. And so
mm,
I think that is one of the things that is happening. This the fact that our education is being attacked, and we know that that is one of the ways that fascism takes root, is
mhm.
by and that they're coming at it from all angles, right? They're, as you mentioned, in Oklahoma, I think they already implemented Prager in
Yep.
materials.
Trigger you.
Uh, yeah,
Yep.
PragerU, which is not a university, as a lot of people seem to not know, but
Mhm.
is just propaganda, very conservative, right wing propaganda. And so the fact that they're implementing this or looking at implementing this for college admissions, military academies, while at the same time attacking people attacking people
In the
who are in
military.
the military who are willing
Yeah.
to speak up.
Yep.
So it's coming from all angles. And so that is incredibly, it should be scary to a lot of people. But again, I think American life has become so expensive that people
Mm.
do not have the time of day to sit and analyze or even listen to us analyze what's happening. People are in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs right now.
Yep.
Uh, People are struggling. And so they're not up there at the tippity top to going, how is this going to trickle down to our kids and future generations if we are no longer thinking critically, but are instead erasing all of the ills of our past and not learning from just the fact that they're taking I think in national parks, Trump ordered the
Yes.
removal of different
Yes.
references to
Slavery and Native
slavery.
Americans. Mm.
And I think about this rewriting of history in real time. And
Mhm.
you and I are hip to it. We're watching it happen and we're going,
Yep.
hey, this is how in the future people look back and say, oh, well, that it was always like that. And it's like, no, 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 it wasn't. And that's
Right.
why it's so important to resist and to tell the stories and communicate while people are still grounded in some sort of reality. And to bring it back to comedy, like comedy is grounding. It's grounded in reality. It's
Very.
grounded in
Mhm.
truth, right? And
Mhm.
so if people right now, if you can make jokes about the fact that, what did Trump say at the UN, that inflation's like at an all time low? Wait, what did he
Yeah.
say? Something
Yeah. Yeah. Inflation is down. I'm like, on what planet?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's where a comedian can go in and tell the truth that people know that will actually resonate with them because it's what they're living. And so, yeah, people, I mean, I could go talk about education forever. I used to be a
Mm,
teacher, and
mm,
our attention spans are so short now because of this, right?
right,
And
right,
so, but that's the reality. We can't fight that reality, which means we have to adapt the way we teach everything. That means we
mm,
have to adapt the way we approach teaching actual civics. We have to adapt the way we approach how our society is integrated and works because it's integrated, right? Like the
right,
different components that make democracy work. Like most people don't know the branches of government anymore because
right.
everything was working so smoothly they didn't need to. And so people have acted as if democracy is this like blue chip company that continues to work because it's always worked, and democracy is a startup and needs to be
Mm,
continuously worked. And that's, I think, in order to do that we have to be willing to adapt and readapt and adapt again everything that we're doing right now. Otherwise,
hmm
we are not we're not okay if we don't do
I,
that.
I'm gonna get you out of here on this. You hit on something that I think is being criminally underreported. We're looking at people talk about the economy, talk about the interest rates, they talk about this. Just the raw story of it's expensive to live. People are trying and fighting to survive. Can't pay rent, can't pay for groceries. Groceries are going through the roof. The average American is having a tough time. We're not seeing this in the mainstream media. They talk about businesses and tariffs. Main Street USA, they know the grocery bill is ridiculous. You
Well,
know,
and also to talk about the international thing again. So housing is an issue in a lot of places, affordable
hmm
housing. But I can tell you, in most places, affordable food is affordable, healthcare is affordable. So childcare is affordable or
yep,
free. And so in America, we're dealing with a compound of housing is expensive, groceries are expensive, healthcare is expensive, making life like it's almost like I always say to people, I'm like, how free are we really in the US? Because if you are living paycheck to paycheck and you rarely have
hmm
anything left over, I was like,
right.
people on plantations also didn't like their housing was provided, they had nothing left over. And so I'm like, how free are people? Really?
You're right, though. You're absolutely right. I had a family member that went over to the UK and they got sick. They had to go in and they were afraid to go in. They're like, how much is it going to cost to go see a doctor and get medicine here? I'm like, it's free. They're like, no, bull, no, there's no. Walked in, walked out, like, oh my God, I need to move because it was like the first time they experienced healthcare and they did not have to worry about the cost. It was like the most liberating thing. I don't know, man.
and
You raised a very good point on that.
but that I think is part of the story that we need to be telling the like
hmm
average American right now is it does not have to be expensive like this. It is
hmm
expensive because Republicans continue to put in policies that are making it expensive. And here's the proof. Donald Trump wants to get out of the UN and talk about how no, we need to tell the story of hey, in X country, this, that, and it, like, not to bring up Charlie Kirk, but he had mentioned when he was in South Korea that it's clean, it's low crime. Well, they also have a lot of social safety nets that we do not have. And
hmm
so if
hmm
we want
hmm
to have all of those things, we have to invest in America, and we invest in America by making sure that people are paying the taxes that they should be paying. And that's something that everybody should be able to agree on. So
Wow. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. You blew my mind by going to that next level with comedy and how it is so applicable to what's going on now. And with what happened with Jimmy Kimmel, I think it's very important for us to understand how vital their role is at night. I mean, everybody's Trump he loves to say, oh, the ratings are horrible, ratings are down. Bruh, if they were so bad, why did you want him off the air so bad? Why did you want Colbert off the air? Why do you want Seth off the air? Why do you want Fallon off the air? Something tells me you may not be telling the truth on the things that you're telling us, and you're kind of concerned. Just saying,
Yeah.
just saying. But
Yeah.
no, I cannot thank you enough. Is there anything else that you want to say? I'll give you the last word on our way out here.
No, I think you covered it. We don't want truth off the air, so I want everybody to keep fighting to stay grounded in the truth. And it's going to be harder and harder because they're taking away that data from us. But we have to work harder to stay grounded in our truth. That's it.
Ladies and
Thanks for
gentlemen, the
having me.
legendary Maya May. You can find her on Punching Up. You can also find her with Rick Wilson, and now we get to get her Protect and Serve with Michael Fedone, which I will personally be watching because I think that's going to be fascinating.
I'm excited
Fascinating.
for it.
So I'm thrilled that you guys are doing it, and please, 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 please do not let this be the last time you're on our show. This is, I mean, I wrote down all these notes while you were talking because I got to go deep dive in some of this
I'm
now.
glad
So
I
I
have you
appreciate the
taking notes.
homework. Yeah, sorry, I got homework now, so I appreciate it. Thank you, Maya. Thanks again, and thanks everybody for watching.
Thanks, Bobby.